Vampires are a versatile monster originating in South, East, and Central Europe. Vampires function as a scapegoat for various anxieties such as fear of death, economics, and sexual and ethnic beliefs. Belief in issues has been described as the result of people of pre-industrial societies attempting to explain the natural, but to them inexplicable process of death and decomposition. Folklore tales of vampires explore a variety of superstitions, many of which are still used today. In folklore, vampires have many origin possibilities, such as if an animal leaps over a dead body before burial, or if the person suffers a violent death, such as suicide by hanging, murder, falling, or drowning. Other origin possibilities are if the corpse has burial garments touching the mouth, or if a weaned child begins to nurse again. Some ways to prevent a vampire from being created is to cover the mirror so the dead cannot look at their own reflections, and to guard the body. To distract a vampire and keep it in its coffin, one could fill the coffin with seeds or grain, where the vampire has to count each piece before leaving, hopefully distracting him till sunrise. An interesting folklore in Roman beliefs is which a pumpkin or watermelon becomes a vampire. This takes place when they are fighting one another or if the vegetables have been kept for more than 10 days. These pumpkins and melons go around the houses, stables, and rooms at night and do harm to people, though they cannot do great damage to folk, so people are not very afraid of this kind of vampire. Bukowski's The Darkling includes court reports, accounts, and testimonials of a town that attempts to kill a vampire. The Moth is a movie based on the legend of Sava Savanovic, the first Serbian vampire. Sava worked in a watermill and upon his murder turned into a vampire who drank the blood from anyone who stayed in the mill. This movie shows Slavic folklore of vampires, how they can turn into animals, and to keep it at bay, you give it grains or seeds that it must count. The way to kill this vampire in this is, as in many folklores, to stake the corpse in the heart and burn the body. It is also important to watch the grave to see if any moths, snakes, mice, or other bugs escape the grave, as this is thought of to be as the vampire's soul escaping. This is the fall in the Moth movie, because as the title, a moth escapes and so the vampire lives on in the town. Gogol's Bee is another vampire folklore that differs a bit. Similar to a Ukrainian tale, The Vampire in St. Michael, this vampire appears in death and must be prayed over for 3 nights successfully. In the St. Michael tale, the vampire slayer is successful and survives the night, and kills the vampire, bringing the person cursed back to life. Bee Slayer was not as successful, and he did not make it through that 3rd night, and it is uncertain if the vampire was slain. In the Enlightenment and Romantic vampire literature, the vampire evolves to a much more humanistic, respectable creature. Folklore belief died because the Enlightenment brought a decline in religion and beliefs, and an increase in logic. Vampires were revived, instead in a literary form to critique the social order and when beliefs were challenged. Vampires were also used in this later time period to face anxieties towards change, innovation, and the uncertainty of the future. The vampires in many of these pieces are aristocratic and wealthy. They were written as more aloof and mysterious, making them more desirable and intriguing. In the case of Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, Carmilla is the main vampire antagonist, and she is shown as a very educated, proper young woman. She almost seduces the main narrator to get her blood. Carmilla seems to only feast on wealthy blood, not bothering with maids or the local villagers. This is a tale that approaches the subject of female and family dynamics. The narrator is shown as a young girl, coming across as maybe 12 while really being 18, and in the end saved by the men, by the staking and decapitation of Carmilla. In the case of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the main antagonist and vampire is Dracula, who is a wealthy foreigner who infiltrates the lives of our main narrators and characters. Dracula covers a number of anxieties, including xenophobia and sexual deviances. The xenophobia is clearly expressed when Jonathan Harker comes to Dracula's castle in the beginning, making casual racist notes of the locals. It is also shown with Dracula being an Eastern European coming into London and disturbing the peace, for lack of a better term. The issues of sexual deviancy is covered in the case of the New Woman. Both Lucy Westenra and Mina Harker are examples of the ideal New Woman of the time. Lucy is very openly sexual, saying how she wishes she could choose all three of her suitors. Mina is the educated, independent side of the New Woman. She is strong-willed and educated in many subjects, even knowing how to write shorthand. Though not technically independent, being married to Jonathan, she very much acts as if she could be her own without problem. Dracula attempts to turn both women into vampires, only really succeeding with Lucy. Both Dracula and Lucy end up dying in the way of staking and decapitation. Modern-day vampires are shown in a variety of ways. Some are curious as to where their tropes come from, such as Twilight sparkly vampires, whereas others display a more classic approach, such as with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It seems most vampires in modern culture follow the same intolerance to the sun, garlic, and stakes through the heart, with a disdain for any religious insignia. In the underworld lore, the vampires can die by poisonous nightshade, or UV rays specifically.
That's what you did.
In Buffy, the vampires can only be killed by a stake, but can be weakened by holy water and crosses. Harry Potter's Dementors can be a metaphor to vampires, as they feed off the happiness, energy, and soul of a person. They cannot be killed or created, but they can be warded off with happy thoughts, or the wizard's Patronus, which is an accumulation of happiness. Chocolate, which contains phenylethylamine, a drug that combines with dopamine to promote feelings of happiness and euphoria, can help ease the symptoms of a recent Dementor attack. Fright Nights is an 80s movie where the final vampire is finally killed by exposure to sunlight. The interesting thing about the movie is the fact that the vampires work as a hive, and if the head of the vampire is killed, all the subjects return to human. Vampires have a very imaginative history of lore and tales. However, it is clear that killing said vampires relieves anxiety, whether killing the vampire relieves anxieties of an illness or drought, or if it is used as a warning story.